In this episode, we talk about gamification and game shows within storytelling and world building.
And in the prompt, we invent our own special life-threatening game of our own special interests, I suppose.
Amazing. All this and more in today's episode of Your Rivers Are Wrong.
Let's dive in.
Good morning, afternoon, or evening. Welcome back to the Your Rivers Are Wrong podcast. I'm one of your hosts. My name is Merle.
And I'm the other host, and my name is Dante.
And in this podcast, we talk about the wonderful whimsies of world building, the arts and aesthetics of setting up a setting and telling stories born from it. Ain't that right?
It sure is.
We're on episode 84, my friend, which you happily reminded me of a second before we started recording, because I have a great
Numbers
brain.
get blurry, absolutely.
Yeah, there's a lot of them by now, which is a luxury problem, I think. How are you feeling? How's your week been?
It's been interesting. It's been a week of, I still feel like I'm in the process of recovery. And I hope that this isn't like a permanent thing where I feel like generally
permanent process
tired,
of recovery.
But like post eye surgery, I just feel like I'm getting my balance back and I'm just like bouncing back into healthy things. And
have you been like fully working and stuff already?
Yeah. I'm back to work.
That's good. That's good.
I've been pulling the job. It's just like, I don't want to say the world looks different, but it certainly feels like I'm experiencing things I didn't experience before. I'm not sure if it's because my eyes are in recovery or because I finally have normal eyes. It's like an is this normal kind of mindset, and that's what I'm easing into. Yeah,
I'm picturing like one of those like viral videos with someone who wears like colorblind glasses, and you're like, wow,
right? Whoa, red's are red.
Yeah, that would be great.
Those videos are so fun.
Yeah,
they're like that.
Everyone watches them.
I'm
Let's
like, wow, too funny.
Yeah.
If anything, I have been watching or just finished a season of a show I didn't expect to like, which is Physical 100 on Netflix. It's about...
I have no idea what this is.
It's a Korean show where it's 100 of the most athletic, fit people compete to see who's got the perfect human
fitness
form. Yeah.
Wow.
So they do a whole lot of like climbing and running and lifting checks. And it's all very competitive and very fun. And for me, I need something to watch on my commute. My commute's like an hour and a half each way to work. So this week I lost my earbuds and I needed something that I could enjoy basically without sound. So
love that for you.
So I turn on this show, Physical 100. I basically turn my brain off and then watch people do really impressive things. And I'm like, this is a great show.
That's pretty good. Yeah, sounds like great time.
Yeah, so it's really intense. Wow. And suddenly I'm very health conscious after watching that. I'm like, oh, these people are just cream of the crop. Maybe I could do something to improve myself. So it was a nice little season. Do they all have like different backgrounds? Is it like one's a bodybuilder and one's a CrossFit person and one's an Olympic athlete and stuff? Well, dang. There's so many Olympic athletes on that team.
Oh, really?
They have like Korean national athletes. So like ice skating and weightlifting and all of these different things. And they also have like people who've worked in the military. They have like ex-military reserve. They have like MMA fighters. Everybody who walks in there is like top of the top. So as people walk in, they're like, oh, I can't believe he's here. I can't believe he's here. And they can just keep pointing out like
sport Met Gala, but for athletes.
Yes, that's exactly it. Like the who's who of sports. So it's so funny that everybody just sees each other and is like, oh, I know exactly who you are, actually.
Is it also international people or Korean based mostly?
It's Korean based. So it's almost entirely. There's like a couple of foreigners, but most of them are localized to Korea or have lived there for a long time.
In the community, basically. Yeah. That's honestly, I do really like watching shows if you're not in a community at all. For you, it's all like basically strangers. So they all have this sort of background and you're just like, wow, he's really good. And that's it. It's like, I love that so much when you're just going in totally blank and then get super obsessed about it. Love it.
So that's been my binge for this week.
Nice. Are you able to watch with sound now?
Oh, yeah, I can watch with sound now.
Is it better with sound?
It's about the same. I'm going to be honest.
Okay,
it's about the
not
same.
even that much.
I hear the dramatic game show music now.
Very important, yes,
but
of course.
That's about it.
I love when I watch this type of shows and then I do like half an hour of yoga and I'm like, oh my God, I'm so fit. This is the equivalent in my real life. I can't do anything else. Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
How about you? I must bother you about your recent stuff.
Oh, for the uninitiated, even though we already know, let's share this on a podcast. Last week, I did an audition for a show And guess what? I got in and I got the part that I wanted.
Let's go.
And it's so great.
Let's go.
And I've been kind of, I shan't lie about it. I've been very much on the like 8-year-old kid theater nerd high for like almost the past week. I was just telling Dante, like, it's kind of the first maybe day that I'm feeling not like super giddy about it, which says a lot about how much I love theater, I think. So, you know, that's kind of my mood this week. So that's great. That's a good thing to ride out like that. Gives a lot of good vibes. Yeah.
Like, let's not downplay it. You got the leading role in the musical.
The female lead. Yeah, that's right. It is Lucille Frank in Parade, by the way, which is a very great show. And you should all look into it because the music's gorgeous and so difficult and very interesting. And I can sing it in almost shorter than a year. Yeah, it's going to be so fun. I'm so excited.
How cool is that? You know what? One of my favorite things about knowing you is that every now and then you just do something like actually incredible. Like actually just like what?
Aside from my regular stuff that I do. Sometimes I'm actually doing something good. No,
you're like in the, okay. I'm signaling with my hands. You're like literally
no,
this
going.
is you like
keep
normally. No, I'm gonna boost your ego a little bit.
Sure,
and
go
then
ahead.
you just come out of nowhere with like this not random, but incredibly specific artistic thing that you just happen to be very incredible at.
Like musicals.
It's like every season, or just like an art piece that you put on, or like
sure.
I think I harken back to like Rocktober where you released 30 like original songs in a month.
Oh yeah.
So it's just like just casually friends with like a leading lady in another country, not where I expect it to be.
That
so
sounds pretty good.
just
I'm not gonna lie. Yeah.
I'm giving you your flowers. One more incredible thing to put on your portfolio.
No. That's very nice of you. Thank you. Thank you kindly. Honestly, I think I do this kind of stuff because it's so nice to like get out of this sort of visual artistry bubble that my work is usually in. Because that's also great, and I love that stuff. But it's very much work because I gotta make my money with it mostly.
Yeah.
And this is just the absolute fun only part of the whole musical theater, singing, acting kind of stuff, you know. So that's also why Rocktober was so fun because it's like it's literally just forcing yourself to just do the music and nothing else. Like you don't have to produce it nicely. You can just like shit barf every day to get something out and just force yourself to be like 100% creative every day, and it's really nice. Yeah, it's a good sort of, I guess, sort of out of your comfort zone. Yeah, big recommend.
Would recommend.
Yeah, 10 out of 10. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm just gonna put that into the air.
Yeah, it keeps the creative energy flowing, you know, which is my favorite thing. Yeah, it's very, very great. Yeah, I'm having a great week. I'm doing great.
Now that I think about it, it's been great.
Yeah.
All right.
Anyway, what are we here to do? We're not here to talk about our weekends all the time, only in the first 10 minutes of the show. In fact, what we do every week that is kind of more consistent than our ramblings in the beginning is that we bring a topic each week that we love to discuss. As I said before, we talk about world building, we talk about stories, we talk about all the things. Every episode, we switch it up. So in this case, today, I am your humble host, which means that I bring the topic and we round off with a little prompt that we're going to come back to in a bit. To start off our discussion, our brainstorm, I guess, whatever it is that we do here. I think today I would love to talk about, I guess, what I call the gamification of storytelling.
Interesting.
There's a lot of ways we can go with this, but I have two specific things that I was sort of thinking about this week that I think is great to start off with, and wherever we end up with, that's fine. And we'll see. I mean, we always do this. We'll see whatever comes up. So the interesting thing about specifically gamification, and by this, many ways to do this, right? You can talk about this in sort of video games where literally the audience has interaction. But in this case, I want to talk actually more about, we talked about it before a little bit, the game show kind of element in storytelling. So we're talking like classics, Battle Royale, Lord of the Flies. We have the more modern versions, right? The Hunger Games, Squid Game. There's all these sort of, actually a lot of stories that have a sort of game being part of the world building, being part of the sort of method for tension, the method for character building, the stakes that are, you know, that friendships are based on, that relationships are based on. There's a lot of things that can sort of hook into this concept of a game at the center of your story. And on the other side, talking of how, you know, a game informs your storytelling and becomes the reality of the characters, which is kind of what Squid Game and Battle Royale kind of feels like. You know, it is a game that you're playing, but of course it's not a game because people die and there's like real stakes involved in this story, right? But then there's also the other thing that I guess came across this week that I was super confused and sort of horrified and kind of intrigued by, which is a Truman Show-esque story, but real life. Like there's a new documentary, I think it's on Hulu, if I remember correctly, about a sort of Japanese game show from like a while back. I think it's called The Contestant, where one person, by winning mini games, I think, earns prizes and can survive longer in the big game. And that whole thing is kind of broadcast. It's a crazy story. You should look it up. I also haven't seen the whole thing yet, so I might obsess a little bit over this in the coming days because it's such a crazy, unethical, like morbid thing that happened in the real world. But it's kind of two sides of the same coin, right? Where on the one hand you have the Battle Royale-esque game at the center of your show that turns real, and on the other hand you have literally real life game shows becoming morbid like that and turning into a sort of dystopian thing. So yeah,
Sure.
there's a lot to this. So yeah, I'd love to discuss. Let's talk about game shows.
That's so interesting.
Because it's so niche, right? Like it's a very specific genre, I guess, that I never thought about it before.
I'm really surprised you brought it up because literally like 2 days ago, I was just sitting there at lunch at work and I said, hey, I never did watch The Truman Show. And like I get the premise, like I understand the story and I already know the end. Yeah, so I'm just like, it was, you know, I didn't really have a motivation to watch it, but you know, just in the back of my mind, I'm like, what an interesting premise. I wonder why I'm thinking about that. And I think it's because,
oh my God, great minds.
great minds. I think it's because I've been on like a game show kick quite recently. I watched like everything happening on Dropout. So Game Changer, Make Some Noise, all that stuff.
The greats.
I've also, Physical 100 has a sort of game show contestant-esque. Everybody's rushing to win this competition. There's also a show that I really enjoyed on Netflix was Devil's Plan. Devil's Plan is another Korean game show where like 13 or 14 very smart people have to play these intellectual games against each other and puzzles. And whoever figures it out and teams up properly and like deceives the rest of the cast, it gets to advance farther.
Is it like a Cluedo sort of detective-y thing?
I'm not sure what that is. I don't know. I'm not familiar with what you're talking about.
Like, yeah, is that not a thing? And it's like a sort of murder mystery. It's like a very famous, like, you know, in the line of Monopoly and all those big games. I think we call it Cluedo. Cluedo. I don't know.
Clue.
Is it Clue? Where you have like murder weapon, murderer, place of murder. Okay.
Yeah, we call it Clue. It's not. It's not quite that.
Okay.
But it is like every episode is a different puzzle, and you have to like form these alliances and work your way through it. Great. Also, like I've always loved games built into the story. I love the sort of death game-esque genre of manga. I've read so many. Liar's Game. Liar's Game is my absolute favorite. I loved reading Liar's Game. It's about this really smart guy who enters into a competition with other people, and they're all in like serious debt. Like they're all in incredible debt, and they have to dig their way out.
Wow.
It very much the originator of Squid Game. If you watch Squid Game, you'll recognize story beats from the original Liar's Game. And it's a wonderful thing where he has to be smart, and he could absolutely win every game on his own, but he also has to save as many people from crippling debt. And it's like this. Wow. It's like rough. This winner take all survival game.
Yeah. Okay.
Liar's Game remains one of my absolute favorite series. There's also, if people remember, Gamblefish. That's such a deep cut. If people remember Gamblefish, it's a game about a high schooler who's really good at gambling. And he everything becomes like it is like increasingly higher stakes of battling. And obviously from Netflix, there's Squid Game. There's also Alice in Borderland, which is again like an apocalyptic or post-apocalyptic survival game where everybody's trying to win these games to have more days of life. So the premise of like games built into storylines and what drives forward is one of my favorite things. In terms of like genres, in terms of tones and themes of stories, I'll always bite, you know.
Yeah, easy hooked. Yeah, nice. So let me ask you a question then. What do you think is the difference between just quote unquote a survival or like dystopia kind of tale and an actual like more literal game show story? What do you think it brings that it can't bring if it's just a survival story, for instance?
It's such an interesting thing. I think this is why I like it. It's like a collective suspension of disbelief. It's not just you, the reader, buying into the setting that is dystopian and weird and bizarre and life-threatening. Also, the players have to accept that their reality is drastically changed, and in story have to suspend disbelief that this is now the new reality. So it's a bunch of like normal people adapting to this world that is so bizarre, so strange. And some people are better at it than others. What I find that's so great about these game show-esque stories is that it gets to show the wile and the cunning of people who are put into these strange situations, how well they adapt. And it's always fun to watch a really smart protagonist being thrown forward in the story and succeed and excel and like be tested and to meet other smarter people. It's always so fun. I do have a gripe when there's was it Osama game? I can't remember. A King's game? It's another manga that involves like a whole lot of death games. Death game is basically just a category in manga.
I love that you brought that term up because I have not even realized that that's a specific thing, like death game.
Yeah, it's like, hey, play this ridiculous, morbid game, and if you lose, you die. That's basically the genre.
That's about what it sounds like. Yeah.
I'm not the biggest fan of when the main character is not smart. I'm not.
This is interesting though, because literally we had an episode where you're like, I love people just being simple and being like a sort of wholehearted, like brute kind of character, right? Didn't we talk about this before?
Yes, I do. I do love the gentle giant. I do love just the powerhouse type character. But when it's a game about being smart, oftentimes if you're watching the MC's main character's point of view, you could just get frustrated and be like, I'm not smart and I would have made the right decision there, right?
Yeah. Because you're rooting for someone so much, right? Like it's definitely also the sport element of it, I think, is so important and like a whole different layer that you don't really have if it's just a story with a main character. But here it's really like, it's almost like allowed to pick a favorite, right? Where in other stories it's not really like as literal as that. So here you can really be on a team because that's the whole point of gamified sort of concept like that. Yeah.
Yeah. Like I love when the main character surprises me with how smart they are because it's a testament to not just obviously the character, but it's a testament to the author saying like, hey, this is this puzzle. After a few chapters, I know you couldn't figure it out. Here's how the main protagonist figured it out. You know, it's like it's like reading a Sherlock Holmes story and being able to deduce the ending of it.
Yeah, for sure. And also, actually, I think it's aside from like the sportsmanship, I guess, even though it's often in like a morbid version of that, but I think what's interesting to me in all these kinds of stories is that also there's kind of a double layer as well, or there feels like there's inherently a sort of subtext present that you can not only beat the game, but also beat the game maker, right? Because very often, I mean, this sort of, I guess by now, if you've stuck with us for a long time, the cliche example of the Hunger Games that I keep coming back to is, for me at least, a good example. And one of the first examples I read of that did this super well. I guess spoilers, but you should read it anyway. In the first book, it's really like, okay, our main character Katniss is trying to beat the Hunger Games, trying to survive this game element of the show. And in the second and in the third book, it's the same sort of structure. It's still beating the enemy, but now the enemy is not the game, but like the people who created the game, who thought it was a good idea to put a bunch of kids in a battle royale kind of sequence in the first place. Like the game is not your enemy, but the game maker is, right? And that's such a satisfying progression. And I think if you do it well, because it's pretty hard, right? Because you're kind of playing two games or having two storylines at the same time. But if you are able to do it right and pull it off like that, it's also why Squid Game, I think, is so good, or why The Truman Show is so double, because it's like, okay, he's super happy in his made up world, and then once he gets out of it, he's super confused. Like, are we supposed to root for the game? Not really, because it's super not ethical and kind of terrible, but like now he's also unhappy. So how are we supposed to feel about it, right? And that relationship is so like twangy and weird and interesting, and it's fascinating me so much. Yeah,
I think it's just the one of the strongest tropes of the game for the players to overcome their own greed and their own survival or selfish needs, and understand that the only way to truly win is a collective effort against the makers themselves. Like understanding that the hosts of the game are by premise unethical, greedy, and pretending to be superior to you. So I think every story has that sort of mysterious entity at the top who rules the entire situation, and everybody kind of dances like puzzle pieces. is such a prevalent trope.
Yeah, sure.
And it brings the question of morality into this whole situation. It's not just life or death. It's, can you break this cycle? You know, what's a fantastic parallel I'm just realizing now is that death game type stories tend to lean into similar tropes of folk horror. We had a whole episode of folk horror with Cassie Mothwin.
Yeah, that's right.
That we had a while back. She explained that one of the basic tenets of folk horror is that the character that we're following in these stories is in a situation that they realize they cannot leave. And they have to reckon with this new dangerous setting as an outsider, as a foreigner. And whether they somehow break out or they recognize that they are simply a cog in the machine, that's the character development. That's where a character can test their morality, test their mettle, and overcome.
Yeah, that makes total sense. Because it is very often, it is a very horror-prone scenario where you... Also, by the way, I didn't even talk about it yet, but sometimes you, as the main character or the contestant, you don't even know what the game is yet. You're just hoping that, you know, in Squid Game, the whole, like, I think the first, like, maybe half of the series, it's just like, oh my God, I hope I don't die because I have no idea what's going on, right? It's so vague, but there's such a power dynamic because it is so... There's so little explanation and so little room for error, right? The whole point of a game is basically that you don't make the errors because then you get like top listings, right? And that's how you win the game. So it's this sort of smartness or, you know, sometimes the smugness or selfishness of like figuring things out. It's being individual and you're also becoming like an image. Like if there's an audience involved at all, that's a whole different dynamic again that you have to sort of realize or figure out. Some people are better with audiences than others, but then maybe not as smart or the other way around. Like there's so many variables that you can play with all of a sudden. And that's really, we talked about this a little bit in the sports anime like episode that we did, both as very low effort sports people. But it's the same thing, right? Like we love watching that. You just talked about it like in the intro, like you find a random sports game and even though we don't care about sports that much, we're still like super involved because you can root for someone and people are good about, you know, they have like stats that you can be like, oh, I love him because he's so speedy or I love him because he's so strong or I love him because he smiles all the time, you know, and that's great stuff. Like it instantly sort of kicks into, I think that there's a specific thing about, I don't know, humans being so able to root for something like that, right? I guess, again, also the whole gamification of it is that you start being competitive, either for someone or as the main character. The sort of drive to win is a very big one, right? And it will bring you, in the case of like horrific stories like that, it will bring you to not dying. So that's good. That's probably useful.
And the genre by design is intended to get you invested in these characters, right? Like we've always spoken that like death is a fantastic motivator for both the plot line and for a character, and the blatant disregard that these settings have for death and how often it happens. You don't know who to cherish, right? You don't know who you're supposed to really care about until they are taken. Yeah. And a lot of these games play really well in that they have a fantastic foundational premise that almost requires a diverse cast, like a very, very unique collection of people. Almost just by design, you have to have this many characters in your story. And it's up to the author to be like, okay, so how are we going to differentiate them? There's the innocent one. There's a smart one. There's a smart rival. There's the cunning one. There's the evil but dumb one. There's the evil but smart one. Like there's like a whole collection of people. When those personalities have no choice but to clash, the story plays out by their dynamics and how well they play off each other, their chemistry or lack thereof, things like that. Yeah,
for sure. I mean, this is what the whole reality show kind of actual genre is based on, right? Like, it's not even a game. It's literally just people in a room that are there because they all agreed to be there, and that's it. And then the drama or the relationships become the content. And with game shows, you have literally that aspect plus the sportsmanship / competitiveness of it. / horror, I guess, depending on what genre you're in. But yeah.
I think when I think about like this death game type genre, and it, you know, you enter this as gamification, but immediately my mind goes to like these very lethal type stories. I'm continually reminded of stories that I can write and stories that I can't write. Like stories that I can write, I feel very comfortable in my niche of like medieval fantasy or academia, and those are like just my two pockets that I'm very comfortable
Been
with.
there, done that kind of
Death game is in the box of things things I'm not smart enough to write. Things I don't have the brain to write those stories, mostly because I don't think as a person, I can make a story that's smarter than the reader. It's like there's this expectation for stories like this for whoever's writing it to just be a step ahead, a level ahead in thinking, in intuition, in logic than whoever's watching it. Because one of the goals of these shows is to set up a situation where people can impress, a situation where people can exceed expectations.
Yeah.
If a game exists and the reader can be like, oh, just do this, this, and this, and they should be fine, right? And it plays out like that, then that's not a satisfying story. One of the biggest appeals of things like Liar's Game and Devil's Plan is that a situation is posed to the characters or the players, and the people watching are like, oh, I don't know how I'd solve this. Like, I don't know the answer to this. How are they going to do it? That's a very core tenet of the genre. It's the mystery. It's a suspense of not knowing how things are going to go down. Yeah.
There's actually a great reference, by the way, about that. I'm sure people know about this already, but there's a great like British TV show called Taskmaster.
Of course.
Or I mean Taskmaster, where it's literally just this, right? Where they just get crazy shit and they just have to figure it out. And because they're all comedians and dumb people / interesting people, it's just always going to be great whatever they do, right? Even if they fail. And that's very much an aspect of it. Yeah, totally agree.
It's like get a duck across the river. And it's like, oh, there's plenty of ways to do that.
Yep.
But the comedian's always like, what's the funniest way to do that?
That's great TV.
So yeah, like the genre for people who are either unfamiliar or looking to write it, we can see a lot of the core foundation. It's a large, mysterious, evil power that creates the scenario. It's a diverse cast of characters, and it's this intrigue that comes with a well of knowledge that you either have to deduce or simply watch play out. Those are my big appeals, and I think it's one of the easiest sells for me. If someone tells me, hey, do you want to watch this? I'm like, what's it about? They're like, it's a death game. And I'm like, let's go. Let's do this. I'm in. I'm already in. I'm already watching the first episode. For people interested in that stuff, on Netflix, Devil's Plan exists.
Yes, this sounds so great. I'm going to super look this up after I wrote it down because I think it's a great premise.
In manga, Liar's Game is my absolute recommendation. TV shows, if you're just looking for something simple, I guess Alice in Borderland is okay. It's not my favorite, but it's pretty good. And of course, Squid Game exists.
Oh, and also there's this one, I watched it like in a sort of binge, like I do. Can't not watch anything without binging it. But it's called Jury Duty, and it's from Amazon Prime.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, it's a wild premise as well. Like they kind of Truman showed someone, but for real, and they sort of pretended that he was going to show up for American Jury Duty. And they built this whole sort of set for like a what's that called, like a courtroom and stuff, and everyone else is actors, and it's very crazy but very enjoyable, I gotta say. Ethically not sure, but I don't know. you should look it up. It's very good. I think you might like it as well because it's very, very hilarious to sort of watch in third perspective.
Oh, just watch somebody being gaslit for like a whole season.
It kind of is what it is, yeah. And of course everyone's funny, and it's sort of a lighter version of Truman Show, but yeah, it's
sure.
There's a lot of talk about this online, I think, but yeah, it's an interesting loophole or a wormhole to like get obsessed over,
sucked into. Yeah, absolutely. And there's just so many Korean game shows that you could look into that are just like, it's
not for no reason that game shows are like the main thing that's on TV usually. Yeah.
One of the most famous properties in anime of a death game scenario is Danganronpa. If you guys are familiar with Danganronpa, it's like this evil death bear who throws a bunch of like high schoolers into death situations. It's not my personal favorite. I know people enjoy it.
It's a big one.
But it's very, very, very famous in terms of an anime property.
Is it like a cute bear or is it like a terrifying bear?
It's like a menacing looking bear.
Okay.
They got evil glowing eyes. I could send you a picture of it.
Wow, great. There's so many. I didn't realize. Like now that we're listing all of them, I'm like, holy hell, this is bigger than I originally sort of planned on. But
sure
yeah, great.
Is.
I mean, it's for a reason. This is just great stuff. There's so much there, you know. Very exciting. We could talk about this for hours, but we're not gonna.
I'm sure.
Because we don't do that anymore. We did the long ones and it was too long. So now we're keeping it tight and nice. Anyway, as we do each episode, the host, in this case me, brings a prompt for, in this case, the other person, Dante. We're just stretching our improv muscles a little bit here. Usually it's connected to the topic, not always. Depends on how much effort we did. So are you ready for some prompting?
Yeah, send me that prompt.
Okay, here you go. In the same vein of our topic, because I think that would be very fun, I would love for you to pitch me a game show concept. And you can either go super ethical or super like fucked up with
Wow.
it.
Okay. Sure. That's the prompt.
I
That's
mean,
the whole
yeah, I
prompt?
guess that's all I got.
Oh my gosh. Ooh, that's a heavy one. That
You can
you
think
know
of
what
it.
I
Yeah, of
just
course, of
said.
course.
Yeah, like I just said that I'm not smart enough to invent these games because in the back of my head, I'm like, I will never enjoy something I'm smart enough to process in terms of like
Okay.
these challenging
Right.
puzzle games. So like I
We
have
can
my
also
bar.
just sort of back and forth it if you want.
No, you're good. You're good.
Okay, okay.
I mean, do you want it to be like a lethal type story? Are we going for like surrealist? Are we going for like?
I feel like since you brought up the term death game, I feel like it should kind of
Sure.
maybe fit the mold if you want to, of course.
There's just been so many, and so this is not going to be for everyone. Like this is very specifically something that Dante would watch.
Nice. Right? That's the whole point of a prompt. Yeah, I think this is great.
I'm just in my head imagining how much not a cup of tea this is going to be for a lot of people. But I'm going to tap into like a lot of the tropes that I like.
I mean, I feel like if people listen to this podcast, they kind of know what they're in for. Like, I don't think you have to apologize anymore at this point for whatever comes out of our brains. You're good.
I'm thinking like high fantasy setting. You throw in like, sure, we can go with 100 because I just watched Physical 100. You throw in like 100 different, very specialized martial artists. Like they're very talented, very capable. Yeah, physically capable.
Right.
The fantasy premise of this show is that you have to progressively eliminate the other contestants. But as you do, after they are killed in this magical fantasy way, you somehow inherit their talents, their exceptional abilities.
Oh, I like that.
Maybe their mentalities, maybe like, and if we want to make this like a moral quandary, like obviously you would toss in a couple of their most prominent memories. So you're forced to kind of carry the burden of all the people that you've eliminated.
Dang.
And I mean, the easiest way to start this show is that there's just one evil dude who immediately kills like 20 people. Just like right off the bat.
He's instantly like everyone's nemesis now.
He's instantly like the strongest guy, right? And then suddenly a weaker cast of characters has to rally together to beat the obvious strongest dude. And part of that is overcoming the moral quandary of eliminating other contestants, inheriting their talents and understanding like their storylines, their backstories, carrying it with them and hoping that what they've inherited doesn't distort their own personal worldviews or distort their own personal values.
That's so interesting. Yeah. Dang.
I think right at the very start, it would be just the main character, hopefully a little smarter than most, because that's the kind of character I like, almost reluctantly kills off this one person who has like a very unique talent. And they pick up like whatever strange fighting style it is they get from them. And they're just forced to reckon with the fact that nobody will ever meet the maker of this style, meet the creator of this type of fighting talent, and they kind of have to fulfill that person's life vicariously by carrying their style, by carrying their talent. This could be a classic power fantasy glow up thing where the main character doesn't actually have any very specific talents. Like you know how it goes.
Oh, that could even be, yeah. As long as you kill one person, then you're immediately more talented.
Then you're in the game, right?
Yeah, wow.
Like useless MC picks up incredible power and has to reckon with 99 more. Like that's just kind of
that's wild. Yeah,
that's such like a hey, this is for Dante kind of show. Hey, take
no,
this.
I love
this
it.
Is like,
keep going. Yeah,
is this everything you like? Yeah, just watch this.
Here, is this all in one show? Yeah, great.
So it does boil down to like the MC having to be, from a morality standpoint, very selective about who they eliminate, who they take the powers of.
Yeah.
Because them personally, they don't really want to do that. They're reluctant to kind of fight this way. They kind of make up for bronze with brains, and they use these strange eclectic abilities to become more skillful than somebody who's just killed the 20 strongest guys.
Right.
Like someone who has the mindset of just collect strength.
Yeah.
They're more of like a collect useful tools, gather them from people you trust, or maybe just carry the lives of your friends on your back in your mind.
I mean, even that's rough, right? Like if you are the one or one of the few people in the arena, right, in the 100 pool that are like there for wits or for their brains or because of their great, I don't know, inventor powers. I don't know.
Wow. Yeah, sure.
Tinkering capabilities. I don't know. Smithing.
Smithing.
Like if you're one of the few persons that likes that kind of stuff versus the I'm big and strong and I'll just like headbutt you and then you die. kind of characters,
Yeah.
you're very prone to friendship with those people. And then if that's your like tactic, you got to kill them off eventually. It's very rough. Because the killing is so beneficial. The whole point is that you gain so much stuff from it. But then you become ruthless because all these people died. It's so rough.
Obviously, like in a perfect world, like you would be able to just team up with your teammates and you would just work together as a collective. But the definition of the game implies that people have to die.
It's a death game. Yeah, it's gotta be.
The worst case scenario is the very talented talents of your friends end up in the enemy's hands, right? So there's this selective thing, like who gets to survive, who gets to carry the legacy, who's the most capable of doing that, and you'd rather lose it to a friend than an enemy, with the hope that whoever you trust your talents with is someone capable enough of deconstructing the entire scenario.
Right.
So
Yeah.
that's my pitch.
Very good. I love it so much.
Hey, Mappa. Hey, Madhouse.
Royalties. Let's go.
Yeah, I'm putting it down here. I'm just saying martial arts, death game with inheritable talents and memories.
Audience of at least
like
one person.
At
in the
least
pocket.
one. You're guaranteed me.
Amazing.
Yeah, that's just it. That's
Yes.
my pitch, and I'm sticking to it.
This is so great. Yeah, it's got all the elements. The betrayal, the power, the death,
The power.
the death game. Yes, amazing. Thank you so much.
Mhm.
I feel like for someone who feels like he's not smart enough to come up with that shit, I think you did amazing.
Thank you.
That's
I
a
do my
very
best.
convincing death game. I would totally watch it. Yep, for sure.
Thank you. And it guarantees there's some really cool animation going on there. Really cool
Oh,
fight scenes.
It's
That's
animated?
all I
Yeah,
really
sure.
wanted.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's got to be.
I mean,
Mhm.
it's also very action. What's it called? Like, thankfully, very actionable, this genre. Easy to put action in. Yeah. And with that, we reach the end of our episode. I'll cue the Oz.
Aww.
If you want to reach out to us, we have a Gmail, which is yourriversarewrong@gmail.com. We love to connect with you. Agreements, disagreements, opinions, ideas for prompts, they're all welcome. We love to hear from you. And with that, we reach the end of the episode. And before that, there's one more thing we always sort of just put out there, just in case, like our little stamp on the world, which is maybe just check your rivers, because I think your rivers are wrong. Yeah. Sorry.
They might be wrong.
Yeah.
They are wrong, actually.
They are wrong. Oh, woof. That's rough. Sorry, buddy.
Yeah, that's just how it goes.
Yep.
All
See you
right.
in the next one.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Your Rivers Are Wrong. If you have any thoughts for topics, prompts, or if you just want to share your thoughts, you can reach us at yourriversarewrong@gmail.com. That's yourriversarewrong@gmail.com. Big thank you goes to Martin Skelligans for our intro and outro music. And most importantly, thank you for listening. We hope to catch you at our next episode. Have a good one.